So my name's Steve McGrath, and I'm going to walk you through the steps I took to turn myself from £20,000 in debt, not being able to walk, not really having a job or any kind of way of paying that money back, into building a personal training business into 1.5 million turnover in 3 years. So it'd probably be best starting back at my childhood. Now, we lived in a pretty deprived area of Manchester. North Manchester, for most of it, is well below the poverty line. There's people that can't afford food, there's people that can't afford clothes, there's people that can't afford even Christmas dinners. I grew up there. Luckily, we weren't in that situation. My parents worked very hard to make sure that we weren't, but we never really came from a privileged background. My dad did driveways and playgrounds. My mum was a teaching assistant. She used to work in a factory before that. So me going to university and getting the education that I did was a big thing for our family, and I was the first person to do that. So throughout university, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I started off doing chemistry, then I switched to sports science because I'd got into sport and the gym and things like that, and I started personal training on the side. When I was going through university and college even, I was a lifeguard and a personal trainer, and I was getting paid very, very well for the age I was at. I think at the time we were getting paid £9.50 an hour to lifeguard, which at 17 and 18 was absolutely ridiculous. I remember having more money than I knew what to do with at the time because I'd never really had money in my bank account before. Then when I finished university, I started to be a physics teacher. It was just something that I got into because I was told it was a good job, good benefits, good pension, all that stuff that you get promised that you think is a good idea when you come out of university. I actually took a pay cut my first year. So when I started teaching, because I had to give up the lifeguard and give up the PT, I actually took a pay cut. I think I was getting £24,000 a year, which for the hours that I was putting in and what it was eating into my life was ridiculous. And if you work it out, a science teacher at high school on grade 1 earns less than minimum wage for the hours that you really expected to put in. Halfway through my third year of teaching, my dad got diagnosed with bowel cancer. So I started picking up some PT because he worked a manual job, he always had done, and he didn't really have any kind of retirement plan at the time. He wasn't planning to retire, but they had to take half his stomach out as part of the operation, and that meant that he couldn't basically work anymore and he had to retire on the spot. So I started picking up some PT while I was teaching just to kind of make ends meet, give some money to my mum and dad, make sure we keep the lights on in the house and things like that. And the school actually found out, and at that point they gave me an ultimatum and they said, listen, you either need to stop promoting yourself as a personal trainer, you need to shut all that down, you need to stop, missing meetings and things like this to do this job and give it all to teaching, or you need to leave. And at the time, realistically, just being a teacher wasn't really going to make ends meet at home. So I left to start my own personal training business. And that was going really well. I was working in a few different gyms around Manchester City Centre. I was getting really good results from my clients. And then I had an accident in the gym. So what actually happened was, as I was doing a farmer's walk, both of my patella tendons completely snapped in half. They were already pretty bad from playing sport throughout like my younger years, but they'd completely disintegrated to the point where when I went into the hospital, I thought I'd dislocated my kneecaps, and we're having a bit of a joke about it, that they were just going to snap them back in place and I was going to go out for Halloween that night. And that quickly changed because when we saw the first physio, they said basically that your knees are shattered and you'd be lucky if you ever walked again.
You are HIV Aladdin?
Got a little bit better after that pretty quickly. Then they told me that I'd be able to walk, but I might need a Zimmer frame or a cane, which at the age of 26 probably wasn't the thing that I wanted to hear. And eventually they got a specialist back in that managed to graft both of the tendons out of a new plastic ligament that they'd used once before. So that set the recovery back quite a while. I was in hospital for another couple of weeks on top of that. And then I had to start the recovery. And the recovery was really long. It was like I used to have to drag myself in the back of my dad's truck to drive to Pure Gym so I could use the disabled showers there. Even the smallest ridge light on the floor, because my legs were both locked completely straight, I just couldn't get over it. And it took a very, very long time before I was able to kind of unlock the leg braces and get back in the gym. When I got back in the gym, obviously, then I realized that not really many people wanted to work with a personal trainer that was getting about on a Zimmer frame and had his legs in braces.
You can't do anything.
And that's where things really, really started to change for us. So online coaching, I basically throughout the whole year, while I was off work, to pay my bills and to pay the bills at home and to help out and things like that, I had good credit from being a teacher. So I was taking out loans and taking out payday stuff and putting stuff on credit cards, and it ended up at the end of the year being 15 grand in debt. Then I really knew that I needed help to launch online coaching, because I tried a little bit and maybe I wasn't getting the price that I needed, and it was just a bit slow, a bit stuttery, and it wasn't really picking up speed, especially obviously because I had more and more bills to pay and this situation was going to make itself worse. So I actually managed to take out a final £5,000 loan, which put the total debt at £20,000. And I sunk this last £5,000 into a business course, just to help me launch and help me scale a little bit faster. The good thing about that was I got access to some resources before I started the course. And before I'd started the course, I'd already made that £5,000 back within the first 2 weeks, because I grafted it. Whether you've been in this situation before, you just have to make it work. All right. And I did everything under the sun. Like, I was working all hours of the day. I was getting up like at 4 a.m, starting work. My dad genuinely thought I was having a mental breakdown. My dad's like an early riser because he used to work obviously on building sites and stuff like that. So they get there pretty early. So you'd get up at like 5 o'clock and he'd come downstairs and I'd be sat like with my legs, because I used to still put my legs up on a seat to keep like my knees elevated. And I'd be sat with my legs up on the seat with my laptop on my lap, just working away. And he was like, "What's wrong with you?" And I was like, "Dad, I'm either going to be a millionaire or I'm going to have a mental breakdown." So I grafted through that course and we managed to go from like 0 to 50K within the first 6 months. And I lived on nothing for this whole period. I just lived exactly like I was, and I managed to pay off that £20,000, the £5,000 loan that I took out, and then the £15,000 that I already had in debt. And genuinely at one point before that, I was thinking about declaring bankruptcy and trying to wipe it off. And that was the initial kind of success we got in the business. Now, every kind of step we made after that, we just pushed and pushed and pushed. And because I was still happy to just live on I was just happy not to have a minus in my bank account, to be honest with you. For the previous like couple of years before that, every calculation I'd ever worked out on whether I could afford something was done backwards. I had to realize whether there was actually enough money left in the minus account in order to pay for what I was paying out. I remember somebody had to lend me money to pay my phone bill for the first month of online coaching because I needed to actually text my clients back and they were going to cut my phone off. So at that point, I was just happy to be able to run the business and not be in any debt. So I scaled pretty aggressively from that point. I invested in mentor after mentor after mentor. I literally paid them, took everything that they could do for me.
This time, let go your conscious self and act on instinct.
Put it all into action, went to the next one and went to the next one. I must have ran through about 3 in my first year. And it got to the end point where we'd done, I think, £150,000 year one, which was mad for me because as a teacher, like head teacher is like the top job, right? And you get £100,000 a year for that. And that's like 10 years of graft and arse licking and working 70-hour weeks. And I'd just done it in like less than 6 months. At that point, I was like, right, this is me. Like online is business for me is forever. I have to make this work. I can never go back to doing that. I can never go back to thinking that it's going to take me 10 years to get £100,000 salary. I just couldn't do it. And at that point then I went all in. So at this point I was a year into the business, I'd done £150,000 in the first year, and I knew I wanted to grow really, really quickly. And that's when I started investing in my brand and investing in my team. So at the time it was just Coach Steve McGrath, which was probably the worst branding that you've ever seen. It was a little purple S. I remember paying someone to make it that was like 50 quid. But we went into this full branding and we made Get Results training, which was at the time, we had very, very good client results. We always got really good results with our clients, and that's what we wanted to base the business around. It was a lot easier back then. You didn't really need to niche down as much because we were one of the first people to really crack the online space. So, you know, it's pretty much open season. We didn't need to narrow down, and that's probably bad advice right now for you. But for me at the time, it worked really well because we could just take in anybody that was aware of online coaching. We were just taking them into our business because we had the best results. So at that point, we started looking at branding the team. We started looking at scaling outwards into kind of a group program and having our one-to-one sit on top of it. And again, because everything was new and because everything was fresh, it worked really, really well. And because we'd already got a foothold in the business, when lockdown happened and gyms started closing and personal training business started to close down, we just swept up. We already had all the systems in place. We were the industry leader of how to actually run an online coaching business. Everything was slick. We'd already invested in email. We'd already invested in getting a website done. We'd already invested in a members area. So all the polish was already done. And I can really pay that back to living on minimum for the first couple of years. I remember like still living in a 2 up, 2 down in Failsworth that I rented off my uncle when we were making 150 grand that first year. Actually, most of that year I spent still living in my mum's spare room. So that allowed us to push money back into the business and scale faster than anyone else. So when lockdown happened and everyone started to have to go online, we were already here. So that year 2, we added 350k. which took the total up to about 500k that we'd earned total in the business. And at that point, because I knew that we were going to survive the pandemic and I knew that things were going to continue to improve, I started to relax a little with my lifestyle, and then things started to really change for us. So even though, like, obviously you couldn't travel very much, we managed to travel quite a lot. Me and my partner went to Dubai, we went to Rome, we managed to get like a walking tour of the Vatican with a private tour guide. But we managed to like enjoy the best of everywhere that we went. We went to Barcelona, we stayed in a really nice hotel, we had steak sat on the beach on a bed, like it was incredible. And obviously you could still pay for the tests and things like that, and it was something that, because I had the money, I was able to kind of skirt around it, because nobody else really wanted to pay an extra £300-400 on top of the holiday. But because I'd not been on holiday since I was like 18, for me it was really important. Started to buy nice cars. I went from having, I think I had a Golf at first, which is still a very nice car. I had a Golf, I got rid of the Golf. I got a Mustang 5-litre one, the proper one, not the 2.3 EcoBoost one that isn't really a Mustang. Got that, got rid of that. We got a dog, so we shipped out the Mustang, got a GLA Mercedes 45, so like the AMG one. It was a stupid body kit, boy racer. It looks like you took it out of a cereal box. And went from there, bought a Range Rover, bought an R8, and now obviously we're doing the business center and things have got even more silly, and it's got a bit ridiculous. So that's kind of what we did. We always went out for meals, obviously when we were allowed. We moved into a nicer area, like we moved out of North Manchester and into Cheshire. And that's where, you know, life really changed for me. And because of that, it really spurred me on even more. Like, it's never something that I did because of settled. Like, I could go back to a bed sit in Salford like yesterday. Doesn't really bother me at all. But knowing that I had these things to pay for and I wanted to go to these places and I wanted to do these things, like, spurred me to push the business further and further. And, you know, in the final year, we had multiple projects running. So we had one-to-one coaching with 5 team members. We had an extremely large group program that was selling out well over 100 spaces a month. We had a coaching course program where we were selling courses to coaches of how to get better results with the clients. And the combined total of that in the final year, we did 7 figures, which to me absolutely blew my mind. Like, the fact that we'd made £1 million in a year was ridiculous. And that's where the transition into the business agency really happened, because I'd started at that point, obviously getting a lot of coaches coming to us asking how we did it, how we were doing certain things, would we recommend that they did certain things at the same time. And obviously I had to start really thinking about the advice I was giving, because what I did at that point in time, when there was such a boom and we were first to market, wouldn't particularly work for people just coming into the industry now. Like, that wave had passed, and yeah, there's going to be multiple waves coming in the future, but the stuff that we did back then worked back then. It worked at that point for particular reasons. So I had to really start looking into, right, how can I give advice to these people? How can I help them grow? And it got to a point where, obviously, because the business changed my life so much, changed my family's life, changed their whole situation. Like, you know, the house is paid for, my parents' bills are paid for, they don't have to work another day in life. My mum still works for some reason. I think she's just a bit stubborn about retiring. But that for me was something that really changed my life and what I wanted to help other people. And I noticed more and more I was getting into the kind of coaches side of the business, and I was spending more and more time there. Lewis was basically running operations on GRT day to day. He was my best mate, who was my first hire into the business. And it got to a point where I actually felt quite bad for my staff, because they were just kind of working on their own and I was so involved in the other side of the business. It just made sense to allow them to kind of start their own businesses and take the clients that they got and go their own way, because my attention was so divided on just doing this because I was enjoying it so much that it made no sense. And now, you know, we're at a point where we're pretty much the fastest growing business agency in the UK for personal trainers. That's not meaning that, like, I'm here to sell you anything. It doesn't mean that I want to talk about that too much in this video. It's just a case of that's where we are now, because that's where the journey's ended. And that's really where this big push on social media has started now, because when I first moved from teaching to personal training, right, my mum cried because she thought I was giving up a good job. When I used to tell people I was a teacher, they used to look at me and be like, oh, right, really, that's really good, that. When I told people I was a personal trainer, people used to roll their eyes. And I don't want that to happen for people anymore. Like, you can grow a very, very profitable business in this industry. And I remember when I was working as a lifeguard in Virgin Active, one of the women actually said to me, the managers, why do you want to get into fitness? Why are you working here? There's no money to be made in fitness. And there is, all right? And I want to make sure that the content that I put out allows people, A, to see what's possible for them, but B, give them the education and some tools to allow to do that. And I genuinely believe that our free stuff that we put out here on YouTube, that we're going to be doing the tutorial style stuff, on Instagram, our short advice and our free courses, will allow you to build a business bigger than most paid courses will. And then when you get to that 5-6K and you want to scale, then you can come to us and work with us, all right? But before that point, there's nothing to sell you. You just need to make sure that you're actioning this advice and moving your business forward. So that's basically the story of how we've got here. Subscribe to the channel. I think there's a button below. I will learn where these are, and I'm pretty sure someone told me there's a bell button up there that you can push as well. I'm not sure what they do, but I'm sure if you do press them, you'll find out when we post more videos.